Talking about the outs and the loans, though, just to come back to it, because I didn't quite get a chance to mention it. Gilmour's very interesting. Gilmour's a really interesting case. I mean, let me. I know you're here to ask me questions, but let me ask you guys first. Would you be happy with Gilmour going out on loan?
So I think the Connor Gallagher situation has changed things because he's having such a good loan at West Brom. Albeit maybe he's changing now that Slaven Bilic has just been sacked after drawing against City. Um, but I think that all of a sudden, if I'm Billy, I'm kind of looking at Connor going, oh, he's now like PL proven, playing a ton of minutes. I know I'm just come back from injury, but I think it could be a good move for him. And I think you just ride the depth with Kovacic and N'Golo Kante and kind of, just take that to the end of the season and let Billy go. But I know, Nick, you've actually watched more West Brom than most of us this season. So what do you think?
Yeah, I'm just curious, right? Like, much like I was when Ruben was at Palace, I did a lot of the same kind of stuff just to kind of see how they were doing. Um, it's an interesting one because you would assume that Jorginho is still going to get playing time to the end of the year, and I think given the insistence of 2 8s that Billy's not going to be first choice in the 8 slot anytime soon. So if he is more of a 6 in this kind of current formation, then he has Conte, Jorginho, and then himself to contend with, and it's just a matter of can he get enough minutes to make the season worth it on the road to recovery, right? It's really interesting. So I love Billy. I want him to stay, but I would understand if he wants minutes to get fit again.
His sort of my take on Billy, which is with a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of insight. He and Frank have a very, very close relationship. I mean, Frank has a good relationship with most of the players, but he is a young lad who Frank's taken under his wing and paid special attention to. And also with the injury, I think it's maybe brought them slightly closer together because I think Frank sort of provided a bit of a father mentor figure for him through that as well. Frank is very, very sensitive to the fact that Billy would love to play at the Euros for Scotland. I know for sure he's sensitive to that, and he would like to do what he can to help that, whether it be through being able to give him enough minutes at Chelsea or being able to use his relationship with Steve Clarke to try and help aid a call-up if he weren't playing enough, or if it be have to consider a loan for him that he wouldn't normally necessarily consider. And the reason for that is Scotland haven't qualified for a major tournament for 22 years. So if they were to go that long again, Billy would be 41 by the time Scotland he had this chance again. It sounds dramatic, but this could be a once in a career opportunity for Billy Gilmour.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we should dismiss that and dismiss the enormity of that for a young Scottish player who, let's face it, we all know, were he to be even playing semi-regularly, would walk into the Scotland squad. Absolutely walk into the Scotland senior squad. So I think he could be made a special case. I think in normal circumstances, Billy Gilmour wouldn't be allowed to go out. I think Frank would want him around the squad. He would know he was going to probably play at least another 10 games, which is enough at his age. And he would want to be mentoring him personally at the training ground. But I think he's a special case. And as long as there's not an injury crisis in the midfield, I think he will let Billy Gilmour go out on loan. And it'll be fascinating where they sort of place him and where they find a spot for him. That will be really interesting.
I think that's the follow up on that question, because to me, just with the way the COVID situation has gone with injuries, as we've seen the winger shortage, where you look like you have a lot and then you actually don't really have a depth of situation, it could almost feel a little bit like squad malpractice in a way, because if you get an injury to N'Golo Kante, if you get an injury to Mason Mount, Billy is probably moves immediately up the pecking order to almost being on the bench every match or potentially a starter. Is there a profile of club or a minimum level that you would expect Billy to go out to, like championship or above, or maybe even like a European type of loan?
Well, there's no point loaning him anywhere where it's not going to help his Scotland chances, because if he goes out on loan, I know Chelsea will talk about getting him fitness and match experience and everything else, but I think the cut and dry of it is if he goes out on loan, it's to try and get in that Scotland squad. So I'm sure there'd be conversations even with Steve Clarke. There's no point sending him anywhere where, Scotland aren't going to really bother too much about him. It's difficult for Chelsea because if you look through the Premier League, a lot of the options where you would immediately say that would be a good place, they've already got players on loan there. They've got players on loan at West Brom, they've got players on loan at Fulham, they've got player on loan at Aston Villa.
Sheffield.
Sorry?
Sheffield too, as you look at all the bottom feeders that
Sheffield
might want help.
Of course. So they've got so many players out on loan that it really cuts their options down. I wonder whether overseas look, Steven Gerrard dismissed it the other day, but going back to Rangers for half a season and helping Rangers win their first title in 9 years and working under Steven Gerrard in an environment where you would imagine he would be comfortable because he's been at that club and where Steve Clarke would be watching him every single week, I think looks a great move. But Gerrard was quite dismissive of it the other day. I don't know whether Gerrard was playing a bit of a game there or not. Frank and Gerrard are certainly still very close. So I think he would probably be forced to look outside the Premier League just because of the sheer amount of loans that Chelsea have got in the Premier League, and they're clearly not going to give him to any club who might be considered a rival. In terms of squad negligence, that's why I think if he does go out on loan, it'll be very late in January, because they'll have to be absolutely sure that they don't get a big injury. And look, there's always a risk, but you're certainly not going to loan him out on January the 1st or 2nd. You'd more likely loan him out in the last days of January, knowing that everybody in that position is fit, at least going into the end of the transfer window.
I feel like one thing that we probably forget as fans too is that when we want to shed all of these squad players, is they help in training as well. When you have to play against each other, because otherwise you have to bring up a bunch of academy or dev squad players as well. So you have to remember that there is value of having good professionals in and around the first team, even if they're not playing a lot. So anyways, I don't know, Nick, any other first team questions about incomings or departures?
If we are, I think the last point I make on this before we touch on a couple other of the loan options is if we're sensitive to Giroud's Euro ambitions for France, then I think Billy needs to be given that same consideration, right? It would just follow a logic pattern that makes sense there. Obviously, France are going to make the Euros far more frequently than Scotland will.
Also, I think, look, I don't see Giroud going anywhere in January now. I think that debate is over because he's clearly playing enough. Even if Tammy dips in front of him again, look, it's clear that he's going to get enough games. It's absolutely clear. I would be amazed actually if Giroud even. I would imagine I'd need to probably check in with his people quite soon to make a check on this myself. But I would imagine the situation at Giroud's end at the moment has changed as well. I just don't see that one as much of an issue for them now.
Yeah. I mean, he came out a couple of weeks ago and was like, I think we're going to figure out a way to make this work. Yeah. It's like, all right, I think we're good. I don't think he should necessarily be the starter every match going forward, but he certainly has a role to play. There are too many matches in too short of a space of time. I was actually surprised he started against Wolves, to be completely candid, given the run of matches that's coming up. So, he'll get plenty of opportunity, I think, before the end of the year.